This is a wonderful crowd. I'm Karen Droege. I'm with Indivisible Mandarin. And I also want to say thank you to Elizabeth Sams with Beach's activist movement. We've decided, as you all know, to do joint meetings because Zoom gives us that opportunity.
Just a minute.
So I'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting. Carol, do you have the slides up? Okay, thank you. Yes, so welcome to the meeting. It's wonderful to have everybody here. And as you know, we're recording the meeting and you can catch it or forward it to other folks. It'll be at the BAM website, which is here on this slide. And we'll be handling questions through the chat function tonight. We will probably have a lot of great questions for our speakers. We've got two amazing speakers tonight. And here's the logo for our two organizations. And then we are hosting this together. It's been a wonderful synergistic opportunity for both teams to do this. I do want to talk a little bit about what I consider to be the 800-pound gorilla in the room for us tonight. And that is the city council race that we all worked very hard on over the last couple of months. Tracy Polson ran an amazing race. It's a great loss to this city that she did not win. And it's really a personal loss for a lot of us because we know her personally and we know the kind of integrity she embodies and the kind of city council person she would be for us and for the rest of the community as well. So I just want to say a couple of words about that. I think we all have gone through and maybe still are in a bit of a grieving process, but Tracy is an amazing example. I spoke to her earlier this morning and she is resolved to not go away, is what she told me. She is going to look at the data, do an analysis, a deep dive into the data as far as what things she can learn from that. And then she is looking to create a path forward for herself as far as potentially city council. I don't know, it'll depend on what the data says. But I think that that's a really uplifting message for all of us is that let's feel what we feel, but let's move forward with action and be resolved to move forward towards the midterms. They are going to be so tough and each one of us has a talent. We may not even know what that talent is, but if we listen to our fellow volunteers, we might find an additional talent that we didn't know we had. So we want to ask each of you to think about the seriousness, and I know that you know what it is because you're here tonight, but just think about what the stakes are leading up to the fall. And we are going to think outside the box. We're going to move forward with a strategy that will get results and provide an opportunity for everybody to take part and take action. And action is why we're here tonight. We're committed to it. So let's move forward with hope and with strength, and we will continue to make a difference. This is the only way difference is ever made. So with that, I would like to introduce our two speakers. And you know, when I think about democracy, I think that there is a role for everybody. And these two folks are shining examples of the roles that people can play in a functioning democracy. Rebekah Jones currently is a candidate for the 1st Congressional District. She is going up against Matt Gaetz, and for that we are very grateful. And she also has played an amazingly important role in the COVID battle with some whistleblower activities that she performed here in Florida for us, trying to help us to get real data. And then Kim Glasgal is our second speaker, and she'll give us an overview of what we know at this point regarding the election results. And that's very preliminary, nothing's been finalized. So Kim is really, as it says here, a data savant. I don't know if a lot of you know, but she's got a computer engineering degree from Cornell in New York. And so anything we ever ask her to do, she does at about 500%. So we're really looking forward to what she can tell us tonight, but just keep in mind, she's not going to have all the answers because they're just not there yet. But we're really grateful she was able to put some things together extremely quickly. So with that, I would like to turn this over to Nancy Stotts, and she will introduce Rebekah Jones.
Thank you so much, Karen, and welcome everyone to our second combined BAM Indivisible Mandarin meeting, and which has been a great success, I think, so far. My name is Dr. Nancy Stotts. I think I know most of you, and I am so honored to introduce our first speaker tonight. As I was alluding to in the first few moments, she, like us, has a lot in common with where she is in that first district. It's a coastal northern county in Florida, quite conservative, about 2-1, I believe, Republican to Democrat, and with a strong military presence. Unlike us, she's actually a celebrity. She has been on national news multiple times. She, refreshing your memory, back in 2019, and I'm sure she'll clarify if I get any of these details wrong, but she was working with the DOH in Florida on the COVID-19 dashboard. And at that time, she was refusing to either omit or alter data that might indicate a greater safety level and lower COVID infection rates than was true, so that the governor's plan to reopen would seem safer. This resulted in her being fired after she blew the whistle on this. After that, she had armed men arrive in her home early in the morning, guns drawn, and her personal devices confiscated in front of her 2 young children. Rebekah was born in Pennsylvania on a dairy farm and moved to Florida at age 8. She was the first generation of her family to attend college and won a scholarship to Syracuse University. She later went on to get a Master's of Science at LSU and did doctoral work at FSU. A mother of 2, she and her husband now live in Pensacola. She received the Forbes 2020 Top Tech Person of the Year award, along with Fortune Magazine's 40 Under 40 award, and was named the top whistleblower. In August, she filed as a Democrat, thankfully, in the congressional race against, Matt Gaetz, I have to shudder every time I say it, in House District 1. She is an accomplished scientist with a spine of steel, and she has a real passion for helping people, as you're going to find out. And we are so delighted to have her with us tonight, Ms. Rebekah Jones. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Some of the dates were a little off, but it's nuanced, so I'm not going to harp on that. It's weird to hear other people tell you like your life story when people remind me that I, was born and spent the first 8 years of my life on a dairy farm in South, rural Pennsylvania. It's like, oh God, it just brings that all back to swimming in creeks filled with poop and all that fun stuff. But yeah, so probably most of you know who I am. If you don't, I'm a paleotempestologist by background, which means that I study historical hurricanes in tandem with climate change. And I took a job with the Department of Health back in 2018 to do environmental health work. So climate change impacts on health, environmental toxicity, things like that. And in early 2020, I really pushed the state to publish a public data portal for COVID-19, because no matter what was happening, I felt the public was entitled to know that. And after pushing for 2 months, finally got the go-ahead, designed everything, ran everything by myself for months. And as Nancy said, when it came time to reopen and the data did not match the plan, I was asked to change the data instead of them changing the plan. And I said no. And I got fired for that. And I've done a lot of things since then. I obviously founded the independent tracker that Florida maintained, which was viewed far many more times than the first one I ever built. I founded the national COVID-19 tracking systems for schools with Google. Apparently, nobody else in the country felt like it was necessary to know how many students, staff, and teachers in schools were getting sick with COVID. So we did it. And then, of course, my home was raided. And the 6-7 months between when DeSantis threw me into the spotlight and when I was rated, I was not political. I actually went out of my way to make sure that I was not political. I held back a lot of the things that I wanted to say, especially during the election time, trying not to be political, because people saw me as an independent data resource. And it was more important to maintain that integrity with my project than it was for me to voice my political opinion. And that changed the morning they raided my home. I remember sitting in my living room watching at least 8 armed men, one of them with an AR-15 looking type gun that he held as he pushed my son around in the doorway up against his back. And I thought, whatever it takes to make sure that this monster, DeSantis, never gets an ounce of power more than what he has now, I will do it. I thought for a while that meant helping the candidates for governor here in the state. I made promises to come help and campaign across the state, do whatever, I needed to do to help defeat him. And then unexpectedly, a year after I filed my complaint, the state decided it was finished with its investigation. And despite everyone's expectations, found in my favor. And my lawyers never thought in a million years it would happen. I don't even know how it managed to get through without somebody getting fired, but it did. And I was granted protected status, which means that the state cannot retaliate against me in any shape or form. And anything that they do against me will be seen as retaliation. So that's why DeSantis hasn't said my name since May, which must be driving him crazy. And I decided then, it was safe. It was safe to stop running, because after the raid, I got my family out of Florida. I should have done it before. If I would have known how sick and depraved DeSantis was and what he was capable of, truly, I would have. But I didn't think things like that happened in the United States. Naive, privilege. I didn't think scientists would get raided for doing nothing other than just publishing data that was public, and it happened. And the whole world watched it happen. And I figured, if I didn't turn that into something meaningful, if I didn't take the fame, I became a Cosmo girl after that, which was really strange because I hated pictures being taken of me. My first professional photo shoot ever in my life was for Cosmopolitan magazine. That is how much I absolutely loathed it. But I did it. And because I first thought this article was going to be about, teaching girls that they can be scientists and they can take on power. And they went hardcore after DeSantis for everything that happened, which, good for them, but did not expect Cosmo to do. But I'm still March 2021 Cosmo girl forever, which is weird. I got Tech Person of the Year, Whistleblower of the Year. I was nominated for a John Maddox Prize, which is the Nobel equivalent for science advocacy. And I thought it was a prank at first, and no, I actually was. And that was, to me, it was like, okay, this is for real. There's international recognition. Turn it into something good. Make something of it. And I'm from the Gulf Coast. I've spent most of my life here. Actually moved down to South Mississippi when I was 9. And I went to grad school at LSU and then, did my doctoral work at Florida State. And I've been living on the Gulf Coast all but 8 years of my life. And I always said if I could live anywhere in Florida, it'd be here, because I grew up in a very conservative rural place that wasn't highly developed. So going to somewhere like Hillsborough, I would never fit in. I'm too much of a small town girl. And it just so happens we have a very deplorable congressman who, in addition to there being indictment hearings related to the sex trafficking of underage boys and girls, is a terrible congressperson who has said that the Clintons trying to get dirt on Trump is worse than the January 6th insurrection, and jokes about what types of explosives would be best to set off in the Capitol if you wanted to set something off, and apparently knows quite a bit about explosives because he went into a drunken tirade about this. So that's the guy I'm running against. And it's not really a 2-to-1 Republican. It's more like a 2 Republican, 1 independent, 1 Democrat. And there hasn't been a Democrat that's polled within 20 points of the Republican candidate in this district in 30 years. And last October, we were within 6. And we're actually doing polling this week. And we're breaking some things as far as what's expected in conservative areas and Southern areas about who a candidate has to be, how they have to talk. You know, Trump wasn't the only person who's capable of speaking like what most people think is a normal person. My dad is a truck driver. You know, my mom had 4 kids by the time she was 21. I did not grow up in a privileged family like Matt Gaetz. I wasn't born a millionaire. I haven't made $1 million off of the taxpayers. I made less than 50 grand a year managing an entire department for the Department of Health with a master's degree and done with my PhD coursework. It's ridiculous. People are sick of it. They're sick of feeling like they have no power. I think, represent someone who had none and found a way to create it. And no company or government agency ever wants to hire a whistleblower because they know that I will absolutely blow the whistle on any shady stuff that I see. From now on, are you kidding me? I will have zero hesitancy. If I were to work for a company that was doing something illegal, yep, okay, bye, I'm telling. And they know that. They know that. That's what happens when you become a whistleblower. If you look at Sharon Watkins, the Enron whistleblower, or some of the other kind of more famous ones, they didn't go back to their normal jobs. They do public speaking, they do self-help stuff. And I'm thinking, if you become famous for your reputation for always fighting for what's best for the people over everything else, there's one job that just so happens to be perfect for you. And that's representing the people. And so that's what we're trying to do. I'm obviously very interested in this group because of my background in hurricane climatology and coastal science as well, and keep familiar with a lot of the issues that are going on. I don't think that our area is quite as wealthy as yours, which is unfortunate, but everything is better for me than where I grew up, which I actually found out today is the 15th most impoverished place in the county in the country. So of 3,146 counties in the United States, including, of course, Louisiana's parishes, which are the same thing, the county I grew up in is number 15 in poverty, which makes it in the bottom 0.47%. And I'm just grateful that I have this and that you guys have had me, and anything I can do to help, because obviously oceans are not something you can legislate locally as much as you would love to. Everything, flows downhill, moves around, circulates. And any support and help you guys have and that I can give to you would be very much appreciated. And I think I just saw a chat question pop up. So, personal priorities. Let's talk about the congressional priorities first. I think my personal priorities are probably pretty obvious. Like always, DeSantis has a very big interest in keeping me from Congress because he knows that I know everything there is to know about COVID-19 and how the state handled it. And I will absolutely immediately open an investigation into how the state of Florida handle COVID-19 data and public information. And I will do that with the full strength and force of my office. And he knows that. That's my personal one. A lot of my community died and didn't have to. And he's responsible for that. And we're going to make sure that we know who did what, who said what, who didn't say what, and finally hold some people accountable for this, because it frankly has not happened. And it's well past time for that to get started. As far as Congress goes, my slogan is elect science. And it's not about who's science, because there's no such thing. It's about a concept of looking at issues from an analytical standpoint while still maintaining the empathy and the concern for human well-being that is necessary as a scientist. And all issues should be looked at through that lens. What do we know? What do we need to know? What does this say about what we need to do? What are our options and how do we move forward? If we're not asking those questions, we shouldn't be trying to legislate. If we don't look at things in that analytical mindset of an evidence-based mindset, then we're basically creating laws in the dark. And I'm not going to be a part of that. Climate change is a big issue. As a climate scientist, I'm kind of biased in that, but we have serious issues with our healthcare system. And especially right now, student loan debt is a big problem. We don't talk about it as much in politics because people under 40 don't tend to show up to the polls as often as people over 40. But the crippling more than $1 trillion in student loan debt is actually shrinking the economy because people my age aren't getting married. We're not buying houses. We can't, because while we're also in a ridiculous amount of debt, wages are not moving. The minimum wage is still $7.25. It was that when I started college, which was too long ago. And that's not good. You can't just squeeze out the middle class until they can't breathe. They're choking the life out of them. And that's something every person, every working class person feels. Everything's going up in price, but wages are staying the same. The argument of not increasing wages was that everything would go up in price, yet it's happening anyways, and wages are still not moving. You know, there are real problems that we need to deal with. I'm obviously a big advocate for veterans and veterans healthcare, specifically toxic exposure. I lost my father-in-law to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma caused by Agent Orange from when he was a Marine in Vietnam. Actually close to the efforts to provide resources and care for veterans from Afghanistan and Iraq that were exposed to toxic and carcinogenic fumes from burn pits. And that's near and dear to my heart because it's affected my family. I'm also a huge advocate for disability rights. My son is autistic. My sister-in-law is fully disabled. She has cerebral palsy. And so that is something that my family and my husband's family care very much about. And there are basically a million problems that should just be fixed that haven't been. And I'm not going there to play or to, pander. I'm going there to get work done. So on day one, we have about 100 items that we already have written and ready to go. Something as simple as, the law currently does not allow you to maintain your disability benefits. If you get married, you lose those benefits. That needs to be fixed. Marijuana is still on the Schedule I list of drugs at the federal level. That needs to be fixed. Veterans can't even get medical marijuana through their TRICARE because it's technically a federally banned substance. There are all these gaps that just stop talking, do the work, the real work that makes a difference in people's lives today. And then people will stop hating Congress. And fundraising wise, really good. We actually had a stronger end of the year than we had when we first came out, which I guess is not a normal thing. I assume since it was Christmas and everybody, is pretty financially strained right now, it would go down, and it didn't. But of course, we're going to need a lot more to be one of the most prolific fundraisers in the House of Representatives, because every time that Matt Gaetz goes and talks about something crazy on Fox News or OAN or wherever, he rakes in $500,000. It's that easy for him. He went off about hiring Kyle Rittenhouse to be his intern, $500,000. Now he's saying that we need to free all the January 6th political prisoners, $500,000. He doesn't even have to try. And he's suckering hardworking people out of this. It's not even, he actually can claim that he doesn't take any corporate money because he doesn't, not to his campaign committee. And he gets that from people. And that's sad, but we're going to beat him. We're already doing this well with a couple 100,000 that we've raised. And as long as we keep moving forward, we're going to be all right. And helping me win, spread the word. I got Twitter banned. It's the craziest thing in the world. I had 420,000 followers on Twitter. I was considered one of the leading 5 influential people on COVID-19 data in the country for the entire period of COVID-19. And then I got suspended for oversharing a Miami Herald news article about what happened to me the day after Jack Dorsey personally met with DeSantis, which was the day after they stopped publishing all of the COVID-19 data and killed the dashboard, which happened to also be exactly 1 year to the day that I came forward and launched the alternative dashboard. I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but that's a lot of coincidences. So anything that we can do would be helpful. I'll send the link into the chat. And if you guys have any other questions that haven't been submitted, please feel free to ask me, because I want to work with every campaign in the state. The reason that we won Georgia in a special election in the middle of winter after an exhausting presidential election was because they were coordinated campaigns. I want every district, every race in this state to see good people elected. I don't personally care what their politics are. If they're good people, you can trust them not to act in a way that will hurt people. We have way too many people who will just hurt people out of spite. I obviously have feelings about DeSantis, but the current rockiness between him and the House Republicans is juvenile, infantile even. And apparently they nixed entirely a breast cancer research bill that was promoted by Casey DeSantis, who just went through chemotherapy, out of spite. They didn't kill the Don't Say Gay bill. They didn't kill the running people over with your cars during, a protest bill. They killed her breast cancer research bill, which would have benefited so many people in the state out of spite. That's cruel people. They don't care about what the politics are. It's just about cruelty. And that stuff needs to stop. So if I can be a resource, by any means, just reach out to me. I'm already working with a couple of statewide campaigns, and I want to see people mobilized, because we're risking, I think, slipping away from being a true democracy. And it's been set up and built for a while, but we're at a turning point where we have to fight. Because if we don't fight right now, if we don't fight like our lives depend on it, there may not be anything to fight for in the next election. And I honestly believe that. And I know that sounds dark and depressing, but it's been a rough 2 years. I try to be optimistic and and chipper, and most of the time I am, because all things considered, I'm extremely fortunate to have come out of this not homeless, with my children safe, untouchable by the state. That's not how this ends. That is not how this story ends for most people, and not just in other countries, but apparently here. And I have a lot to be thankful for. And as long as this keeps working, I'm going to keep doing it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have a couple of questions from people who submitted questions, which I'm going to combine for timing. One is about the lack of daily and county specific reporting of COVID data that started back in June.
Yep.
And how also for days at a time, the New York Times tracker says, quote, no new cases were reported in Jacksonville, no new deaths reported. Isn't this reporting mandatory? Could you comment on that? I think I know the answer, but go ahead.
There was never any data that was mandatory to report. That's a cold hard fact that people often overlook. There were efforts at one point in the Trump administration to standardize data reporting across all 50 states. I was actually a part of that team to do that. I led the best practices call with FEMA on it. And then a couple of weeks later, I got fired, and it never happened. And nothing was ever mandated to be reported. And that's part of the problem. There's no standard metric to be reported. The state now submits its data sometimes twice a week to the CDC, although sometimes it's not regular, but at least once a week. The decision to take the dashboard down was the weekend of June 12th, which, as I mentioned, was 1 year to the day that I launched mine. And so there isn't new data being provided every single day. It's usually bi-weekly. I think Tuesdays and Thursdays, or Mondays and Wednesdays, whatever they've resigned to now. But they only release their own data once a week, and that's on the weekends. And it's really, I get some heat for this, but it's really shameful that Biden did not mandate standardized reporting across all 50 states. It's shameful to me that myself and Google and a handful of volunteers had to continue to mandate the only national tracking system for COVID-19 in schools, and that they did not undertake that themselves. Nothing much changed as far as reporting standards went. And in fact, things have gone backwards. And that's difficult to face. I actually know the guy, Andy Slavitt, who was tasked with reforming that. He quit after a few months. So, and not all new people in office are always as invested in transparency as we hope that they are.
Yeah. Speaking of other facts, Dr. Ashish Jha recently came out with an analysis that showed that while California and Florida had pretty much equivalent infection rates with Omicron, which was, of course, after vaccines were available, Florida had a 33% higher death rate. And that's, I think, the message that you and others and all of us need to pound home is it didn't have to be this way. This was a choice. This was vaccine hesitancy in Florida. Someone asked a question about mental health, which I'm going to skip. It's really it's a little bit long, and it's just basically, it sounds like you're for expanding, all healthcare, including mental health care, but how it relates to Jacksonville per se, of course, you wouldn't have any control. And then the final question here is, what have you found to be the most persuasive point you raise when speaking with Gates-friendly voters, if there's such a thing? Or is your primary target Democrats and NPAs?
It's both. And I've found that a lot of the Republican base that's out of touch with what I'm trying to do won't hear me anyways. But for those that maybe it bothers them a little bit, what the things that they've heard, and sure, Matt Gaetz is saying it's all a conspiracy to ensnare him, even though even Trump won't stand by his side in it. I find myself asking them, if you wouldn't let him babysit your kids, why would you let him babysit your country? And I think that kind of reflects the moral dilemma that some of these good intentioned people who believe in kind of conservative family values really get stuck on. It's like, if you have a teenage daughter, would you leave them alone with Matt Gaetz or teenage son and feel that they're safe? Why in the world would you let him pass laws that mandate, how teenagers can live, and things like sex trafficking bills, in which he was the only person in the entire House of Representatives to vote against? He was the only one. And you really, half the work is done for itself. The guy is horrible, and he was never good at hiding it. He used a public payment app to pay one of the girls $900 for tossing his salad. Mm-hmm. That doesn't, come on, man. At least try not to get caught in the horrible, awful things that you're doing. So a lot of that work's being done, but it's also the fact that by the end of this term, he'll have made over $1 million in taxpayer money, and he's gotten one bill passed the entire time. I don't know about you, but if I pay somebody $1 million to fight for my community, I expect more than one bill in 2017. And it's a bad investment. And if nothing else, I've proven that I will fight for the people of Florida. I don't care what it costs. And I knew there was a realistic possibility that I could be shot. There still is. There is absolutely the possibility, with not so much me going against Gaetz, but me against DeSantis, that some crazy person will shoot me. And I know that every time I do a public event, and it's worth it to me. So people understand that. They watch this entire thing unfold in the public eye. They watch what my family went through, what my children went through, and they know that. And I don't think they know a single other politician who would say, if I get shot, it's worth it, because I will have fought for what's right. And I think being real about why you're here is a huge asset. Not everybody can be famously rated on TV, obviously. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but there's other ways to communicate that. And
so that leads that leads perfectly to our last two questions. So the first one I'm going to read is near the end first, but your messaging is so practical and real. What do you think are the top 3 messages that could work for Democratic candidates in Florida to win?
It depends on where you're at. I don't think what works here, or even what works in Brevard, would work in Miami or Broward. As far as these more conservative places, you also need to consider, is this an economically conservative place or this is a morally conservative place? I'm more in a morally conservative place. So that messaging has to be catered to that as well. I think Brevard's more of an economically conservative place over the morality issue, given some of the representatives you guys have to deal with, like Randy Fine. Oh, bless your hearts. But anyway, I would say meet people on their level. Every community event, every parade, every meeting, be there. Listen, don't talk all the time. That is one of the things that people have often criticized me about, is that I will show up to things and I'll never speak because I want to hear and I want to learn before I decide what is best. And be unafraid to be imperfect. This idea that candidates have to be perfect, they have to be rehearsed. I have never written a speech, not once. This is not a speech. I have never once had to read a speech. And I've been on television for almost 2 years now, usually 5 times a day, every major network. I've done CNN more times than I can even count, MSNBC. Fox News has never called me, but when they do, we'll be ready. So speaking from your heart, if I could only give one piece of advice, it's to stop thinking about what the party wants, stop thinking about what Washington wants or what Nancy Pelosi wants. Think about what your people need and speak from the heart. That is the only way to get through, especially in a conservative area.
That's a great message. I want to get Joy's question. What's your opinion of Dr. Ladapo, who was already confirmed, actually, Joy? Unfortunately, they slipped that in.
Make my maddest mean face. It's an insult and an affront to every healthcare worker in the state, to every employee of DOH who has put in blood, sweat, and tears and a whole lot of fear into sticking it through this pandemic because they believed in what they were doing. To hire a person who has never treated a patient in his life, who has never been a licensed practicing physician in his life, who pushed hydroxychloroquine and drugs that killed teenagers in the state of Florida, who was at a conference in which he lied repeatedly about being a frontline healthcare worker, while one of the conference people went up and started talking about how the vaccines have demon sperm in them, and he's nodding and applying. That is offensive. It is hurtful to all of the people who have managed to stick it out this whole time. It's incredibly useful for me because all of the sources that were too afraid to talk to me after the raid have now come back and said, screw it. Obviously, we are so far gone. If I don't quit, here's what I know. And that's sad because it takes some real dedication to have stayed this whole time. And the only good people left, if they're not already gone, they'll be quitting soon. And it makes me angry for them because they stayed to try to do the best they could from the inside. And to be insulted by he's not even a crazy practicing physician. He's a crazy, never treated a patient in his life physician. How could he possibly know the first thing about dealing with a pandemic when he's never even slapped a Band-Aid on somebody? But I could go off about this man all day and night. So it's probably best we not, because yeah, positivity and all.
Right. Right. And I want to give Kim time for her presentation as well. You are so wonderful to listen to and very inspiring. And we are going to share your website far and wide because I agree with you. We need all rising tide lifts all boats. We need to be in this, all together. You are welcome to stay for the entirety of our program, but we also understand if you have things that you need to do. So once again, thank you so much. And I'm going to kick it back to Karen.
Thank you. And thank you, Rebekah Jones, so much for that. We couldn't have had a better cheerleading session, could we? She's amazing. And it just makes me energized. And I know it does you too. We are going to look at the data here with Kim in just a minute, but I want to bring this back to what we can do here. And as you can see, there's more than just the canvassing, the texting, the phone calling. the kind of standard things that we've done. They're very unique skill sets that really help to protect democracy. But each of us has something they can do, probably a couple of somethings. And we just like to see, this isn't a commitment, but just kind of a feel for what people think their interests are, their skills are moving forward. Because we know that in November of this year, we're going to be working towards November. We're not going to wait until July to start working on that. But could you put in the chat just the kind of things that you think you want to work on, even if it's something you've never worked on before? Because I assure you, if you volunteer for something and you've never done it before, there's somebody else here that has done it and will help you through it so that it's not scary at all. So just like to, as I said, there's no commitment at all. It's just kind of a fun thing to see where each of us are at as far as what we might want to do.
What do you want us to do?
Just type into the chat where your interests lie. Like, okay, I'm willing to canvas. I'm willing to sine wave, that kind of thing. Or if you've got something unusual that you think is a great skill set, if you're brilliant at strategy or something like that. And we'll just take a look at it when the meeting is said and done. I don't want to take time discussing those things right now, but it's just kind of let's take a look and see what we can do and kind of commit internally to making sure we all stay active. We have all got to row in the same direction, and that's where our strength will lie. And we need everybody active. When Trump was in office, or as he was approaching office, well, I'll say when he was in office, we were all so worried. And we need to be even more worried now. And we need to help our friends get worried too, because it's going to take all of us to protect democracy. So with that, I don't know how I even transitioned to you, Kim, after that one, but I think it is that all future decisions and strategy will be based on data, not on gut feeling. So that's where Kim has provided, I can't even verbalize the support that Kim has provided to us. And a lot of us know the abilities she has and the dedication she's had. And it's so good to see you again, Kim. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say with the limited amount of data you've got right now. You've worked a miracle just by pulling things together this quickly.
Well, you haven't seen it yet, so.
I'm sure it'll be great.
No, it's okay. It is so nice to be among familiar faces. It's so great to see everybody. And I'll tell you, I hate to bring it back to the message of the election that was lost, but there are some very bright points. So I hope that those points become clear. It's really a heartbreaker because it was so close. But I will show you what a little bit of boots on the ground can do. And I just approached the data like, as if I didn't know anything, okay? So, all right. So let's get started. Okay, so first I'm just going to go over a basic overview of the results, then look at the different districts and how they performed. We're also going to compare to what has changed since the first election, and then check out how people voted just for fun. One thing I like to do is to show the effectiveness of certain campaign strategies. So for example, I like to show, well, when we canvassed how many people were home, and of the people we talked to, what was their turnout compared to general turnout. And unfortunately, I don't have the contact data, but I think we can infer some things, and hopefully I'll get that in the future. It's just 2 days after the election, so a lot of things are still very preliminary. Okay. So first, the overview of the election results, which some of you very savvy election watchers already know, but not assuming anything, starting with the basics, we can see how close it was. You see a difference of only 4,500 votes. And what is 4,500 votes? It's 0.7% of all of the eligible voters. It's 1.7% of eligible registered Dems, okay? So let's see. Dems turnout, which is the percentage of Democrats that actually voted, was 21.5%. Now, for a special election, that's very high. We expected, normally you expect between 12 and 17%. So this is very high. Republicans had a higher turnout. They have lower registration numbers. So it's a higher percentage of a lower number. And NPAs did not perform very well, and they generally don't. Even in general elections, they perform significantly lower. Okay, let's see. Okay, now, one thing that I thought was really interesting. Okay, so if you look at, can you guys see my cursor? I
Yes,
can't see
we
you.
can see
Okay,
it. We can
thank
see
you.
it.
Good. Okay, so you see there were 57,000 votes cast by Democrats, right? Polson got 64,000 votes. And of course, you see the same thing for Howland. That means that there were votes, 13,000 votes for the two candidates that came from non-major parties. And it was about a 50-50 split. Now that's a very positive sign. All right, I got to see people for this one. Okay, that's a positive sign because normally the NPAs in Duval County break 60% for the Republicans, or even more so. So this is really good. So that's really good. Okay. So now I'm going to show you some boring charts, but I will try and interpret them as best as possible. Okay, so first, how did we do in districts? Okay, the red bar is the Republican, the blue bar is the Democrats, and then these are the districts, okay? So you will see that in, say, District 6, there were a lot more Republican votes than Democrat votes. That does not mean that we did a bad job in District 6. What it means is maybe there are a lot more Republicans living in District 6. So you need more information before you can do some takeaways. However, one takeaway is that we actually did beat the GOP in actual number of votes in District 1, right here, in 7 through 10, see? And in 14, it's very competitive. Okay, but that's only part of the picture. So now we'll go to the next part of the picture, turnout percentage. Okay, so again, blue is Democrat, red is Republican, and this is the percentage of the eligible voters in the party that turned out. And you will see that there are areas where the Democrats turned out percentage-wise as high as the Republicans or higher. There were only a couple of places where the Democrats beat the Republicans. And I will also point out that it is unusual for Dems to beat the GOP in 13 and in 6. So what do we know about 13 and 6? We work there.
We work it.
Right. So the work makes a difference, even in a special election where you really don't have very good turnout. Okay. Then, whoops, sorry, I got to go back. Okay. And another takeaway is that we did outperform the county average of Democrats and Republican turnout, which was 24% in these districts. So 14 is Tracy's home district. She has a lot more name recognition there, and maybe a lot more volunteers working in that area. but you can see here are the areas where turnout was higher than the county average. Okay, again, it's where we were working. So, all right. Now, one big goal, all right, don't look at this yet. One big goal was to increase Democrat turnout between the first and the second election, right? So people worked so hard, and thank you so much for all the work you did to do this. Increasing turnout, the biggest increases were in 13, 14, 5, and 6. What does that tell you? Whoops, sorry. I hit my, what does that tell you?
Personal contact matters.
Right. Where we work made a difference. Okay, we in the biggest increases, and this is the increase in, this is a huge 20% increase. That's huge. Okay, so it really makes a difference. This is from the first round to the second round. Okay. Now, all right, so the percentage is good, but we also like raw numbers. I don't know why I have this in here, but this is the turnout and the potential voters. So this shows you areas where you have the most potential to increase turnout. Okay, I think I was punchy by the time I did this, but what I would do in this case is, instead of looking at total Dems, you know, if I had more time, I would go ahead and change this to hot Dems for a special election. So one thing about a special, normal elections, we focus on warm Dems because they vote, sometimes they're sporadic voters. How do we get them to be always voters? But in a special election, you don't do that because a lot of people don't know about the election. I have a friend who's a hot Dem, and she knows who she is, and she's on this on this talk right now, and she didn't know about this election for round one. So we can't assume that the hot Dems necessarily know. So it's good to not ignore the hot Dems. And turnout is so low in these special elections that we just have to get, as it's not really a waste of time to talk to hot Dems. So I would say narrow to maybe hot, hot and warm to see where your biggest potential is. And I hope that makes sense. Okay. Now, number 3, vote by mail and early voting. This is going to be exciting. So first of all, not this slide, but the next slide. Okay, so it's really surprising that it's roughly even for Democrat voting. Election day, early voting, vote by mail. So, you know, those get out the vote efforts for early voting and election day are really important too, as you can see, because they account for 65% of all the Democrat votes cast. Okay. And lastly, well, almost lastly, 47% of all of the vote by mail Dems voted. Now, we don't know how they voted, whether it was early voting or whatever. I would be able to get that later. But for now, we know that of all of the Democrats that have requested vote by mail ballots, 47% of them voted. Now, if you remember that Republican plus Democrat turnout was 24%, you can see how huge that is. It's huge. Okay. So that tells us that our work to get people signed up for vote by mail makes a difference. Okay. So this is normally what I would show if we were talking about the effectiveness of different, Kathy had said, put in something about what you would show if you had the data, and that is something that is very important to look at when you're strategizing for future elections, how effective is your strategies on the target group? Okay, so you'll have to compare to people you didn't contact in the same target group, like consistent voters or inconsistent voters. Okay, so I will be able to present that if there's any interest once we get that contact information data. Okay, so I think I made it on time. So now stump the speaker or don't. I'm tired. I am ready to take any questions.
Yeah.
Can I just say, first of all, thank you so much for doing this on such such a shortened time frame, and we really, really appreciate it.
I hope it addressed some issues that you wanted to see, some, some statistics that are of interest. It's of interest to me. I love it. But I don't know how everyone else
Is it possible that District 6 and 13 are just inherently more politically interested, and that's why we have so many groups, and so it's self-selecting? Is that a possibility?
I think that's part of it, but there are other districts, like, I don't think that we have a monopoly on active voters. So, 11 has, politically interested voters. I don't, that's a good question, but if you compare to the first election, you can see there was a huge increase. And so that's because I think that's where we worked.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Any
Kim,
other-
Marion has a question.
Oh, okay. Hi,
Well,
Marion.
It is. Hi, Kim.
Hi.
Great work. Great timely work.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make a statement. I
Yes.
think Mandarin bodes very well because we had two excellent early voting sites. We had the Mandarin Library and the South Mandarin Library. Because San Marco was not open, I think that was a detriment to a lot of people finding an easy way to vote during
Yeah.
early voting. And I
Yeah,
know
that's true.
that we worked the district, was it precinct or District 5?
Yeah, District 5.
But
Hmm.
because that site isn't open, we have to get more and more people there, in case that precinct doesn't open, in case that early voting site doesn't open again. Although
Right.
they say that it will be open during the primary, but I think it was a detriment for this one.
It was a detriment, but how much was it a detriment to Democrats more than Republicans? So presumably it was also a detriment to Republicans.
Well, we do have more Democrats up in that area, but that's my perception.
Yeah, definitely a factor. Interesting. I
So
could look
Kim,
into that. Yes.
next question.
Hmm.
Do you know how many thousands of Democrats were knocked off of the vote by mail sign up from 2020 to now? What potential do we have to get those folks back?
Well, I know the difference in the vote by mail rolls is about 40,000. Okay, a little more.
Okay.
So I don't know it, and probably more than that were knocked off and then re-enrolled, like many of us on this call. So I can find that out, but I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay.
But I can find that out. But the difference now is from 2020 election is about 40-something thousand. Okay, I'm writing that down.
So if we had had those people still on the rolls, Tracy probably would have won.
Yeah, for sure. Yes. But some of them, there's some people get purged after 2 general elections normally. There wasn't anything in particular that the legislature did to get people off of vote by mail. You know what I mean? It's just people don't know that it expires. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. But I'll find out how many knocked off. And I know there was a campaign to re-enroll them, and it went on for quite a while. So we'll see how many of those people did re-enroll. Okay. I like that. All right, next. Okay, 2 participants have raised hands. Joy.
Yes, hi, thank you
Hi.
so much. You are wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
I worried, and I don't think the data supports that. So let me know that some of the Black voters in certain districts would not vote for Tracy because of Coach Jacobs did not endorse her. And, you know, for some voters, voting is very personal and relationship based. We know that. But I don't think the data supports that. So is that right?
The turnout in those areas was relatively low compared to like the turnout percentage. Now the actual vote numbers are higher because there are just more Democrats there. And then again, this is people who voted that are members of the Democratic Party. We do not know who people vote for. So we are making it the assumption that Democrats voted for Tracy, and it's a fair assumption. Okay. So in terms of, I'm just looking at the chart, turnout percentage. Okay, so District 7 did pretty well, okay? But District 9 and 10, those districts did not perform, let's see, turnout percent, did not perform quite as well. And there was an increase in turnout from the first to the second election, but it wasn't as high in those areas as it was in some of the other areas. So I think the data kind of supports your theory.
Okay.
Does that make sense? They still had okay turnout, but didn't go up as much as some of the other areas. And I had heard that anecdotally, but you just want to make sure the data supports it.
Now. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is Ted. Are you next? Hi, Ted.
Hi, Kim. I wanted to, I sent a message in on the chat, but I'll try to sum it up.
Okay.
I was working the poll, and there was a lot of confusion because the polling place had actually been moved like a day or two in advance, very, very short notice. A lot of confusion. And it got me to wondering if there was any way to find out if this thing happens every now and then to various places, you know, where people have to move their polling. And if so, is it impacting the voting at all? Are fewer people voting because of this?
Well, it's another reason to early vote or vote by mail, but it does happen. It happens in, you know, every election, particularly the last few because of COVID. And what happens is the supervisor sends out a list, they have it on public radio and blah, blah, blah. But also the parties tend to text their voters to let them know, like the voters just in those precincts, to let them know. But that's assuming you have their mobile to be able to do that. So yeah, it's a problem.
Okay. So you could compare like from election to election and see if that particular precinct suddenly spikes or goes down.
The effect of moving or closing in the case of San Marco Library polling place.
Well, this
Okay.
was like going from one church to another
Right.
and moving it down the street and putting it in another place where it never
Well,
had
as
been
long as
before.
they
apparently.
have signs, I
They had
mean,
one sign. So,
yeah.
and they did have people redirecting people, but I just remember one person came in and he was really ticked and he said, "Who do I complain to about this?" And they had to calm
I
him
see.
down and basically say it wasn't a conspiracy or anything like that. But
Mhm, mhm.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
interesting.
it's not, okay. Polling place or EV site, okay. Any other? Thank you, Ted. It's
Kim-
great to see you.
We have another
Thank you.
question about whether you can tell a difference between women's turnout and men's turnout. I don't know if you sliced and diced it that way yet.
I didn't, but I can. All right, let's take a look. I happen to have something handy here. Okay.
Your magic wand.
I have kind of a magic wand. Okay, this one doesn't have women. Now, first of all, it's interesting. There are a lot more women registered than men. So I think that's interesting. And you can find this on the SOE website. And I am happy to walk people through the website because it has such good information. So there's a place that has voter demographics, okay? So you can get, it's called voter statistics. I'm opening it up now, okay? There's voter registration statistics summary. Okay, so let me share my screen. So sometimes I use this, wait, I gotta make sure I get the right one. Yeah. Okay. So I'm in voter statistics, and then I did this registration statistics summary. Okay. And here we show, this isn't the voting yet. This is just the regular demographics. So you can see there are a lot more women registered than men. I think that's interesting. And you can get other statistics by their actual votes. And I can get that for the first election, but they will publish it for the second one. Otherwise, I have to go through VAN. I can do that too. Looking at who voted based on gender. Should I do that real quick?
No.
Okay.
We can put it,
After
we can
8.
put that together later.
Okay, so gender, what specifically do you expect to find? Who asked me that question?
That was Gloria.
Me.
Oh,
I
Gloria.
was thinking that, I mean, a lot of women of every demographic really connected to Tracy, because I was out there
Mhm.
canvassing to lots of different people in lots of different neighborhoods, and the women were really enthusiastic.
I
And I'm
see.
thinking if there were people who just sulked about Coach Jacobs, it may have been male people, with apologies to all the men on this call, sorry, guys. But I think it would be interesting to know that, because I think Tracy connected to a lot of people, but probably to more women.
So it would be interesting to see female turnout for her race versus a man running for city council, maybe. Women, female turnout for a male city council candidate. It'd be interesting.
Large city council.
Or any election, but
Well, but that way it would, it wouldn't be based on a district. It would be the whole city.
yes, right. Okay,
Yep.
so,
Miriam has a question for you.
oh yeah. Hi, Miriam.
Hi, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. Hello, Kim. So nice to see you. What a great report.
Thank you.
I have one point to make. The early election period was shorter than usual. And I have a feeling that if we would have had a 2-week early election period again this time around, more Democrats would have come out, because we have areas of Jacksonville where souls to the polls are very important. So the 2 weekends, in particular Sundays after church, is a very high election, people come out and vote. I was sign waving in District 7, I believe, towards the end of, really towards the end of early election. And people were shocked that early election, that they couldn't vote anymore, that was over. I think they were kind of counting on having more time.
I thought the last day of early voting was the Sunday before
Right, yeah.
Election Day.
Yeah.
So that's the same. It wasn't the same length. So
I thought it was shorter.
No,
I
it was
thought we were-
shorter. It was 10 days instead
Yeah.
of 14.
Yeah, so there were a few days missing. And if you remember, and I don't know if you watched the numbers coming in, we had a real, early election.
advantage.
Yeah,
Right.
we did really well. And I think by having vote by mail, some issues there, people were turned off going canvassing. And I'm sure all of you had that. A lot of elderly people still were waiting for their vote by mail to arrive. A lot of people were concerned about the post office not functioning as well as they thought they would. And also on top of that, so it was kind of a trifecta, they were concerned about the laws which had changed and the restrictions which were put in place, including not having outdoor mailbox drop boxes. So there were a whole bunch of things. People were like telling, at the door, I heard, and on the phone, I heard a lot of that. The disgusting signs at the ballot didn't help. That didn't help. Did not help.
Okay, so for the drop boxes, it really is a nice convenience to not have to
Yes.
go in, to have to park and go in.
Right. Right.
But the reason that they were put there in the first place does not exist anymore. The reason then was that it was COVID.
Right.
And it wasn't safe to go inside. And now we're
Right.
beyond the risk. We're above the threshold or whatever. So they didn't feel the need to leave them out there.
Yeah,
So-
and the money, because the Republicans wanted them to be safeguarded, by officers. But I think a lot of the older
yeah, there's
people
that.
a lot of the older people I met still kind of live like hermits, they
Yes,
still.
yes. No, I know.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to take up that much time. So
No,
good to
no.
see you.
Good to
Thank
see you. Well, I
you.
can't
Great.
see you, but nice to,
Sorry,
nice
I'm
to
on
hear
my
your
phone.
voice.
Thank you.
Kim, I think
Yeah.
this will be the last question. We're getting pretty late. Joy's got a great question for you. She says, if you had to summarize for us, what are the key reasons why Tracy Polson lost the election based on the data that we've got at this time?
Based on the data that we have now, it's so close. It's hard. I don't even know what to say. It was so close. I think just higher turnout among Dems, which is what it is in every election. Our turnout is always lower than the Republican turnout. So I don't have any other insight into that. The other thing the data shows me is that the personal contact works. So if we add more volunteers and had knocked on more doors, and I'm guilty because this is the first time I didn't canvass, so I feel terrible. But if I had knocked on some doors, she might have gotten elected. Not because of me, but because knocking on doors works.
Yeah.
And so I guess that would be the main thing that I saw.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Kim. This was astounding. I'm really surprised at the amount of information you were able to pull together, and it really leads to a lot of good strategy ideas already. We're only 2
Thank
days
you.
past the election, so thank you. We
Yes,
really appreciate that.
wonderful.
Thank you.
All right.
Oh,
So-
I'm sorry. I just want to say one
Yeah.
other thing though. And the vote by mail, I know Miriam, you had mentioned that there were issues with the vote by mail, that people felt they hadn't received their ballot, or they were nervous about the mail and the drop boxes weren't outside. But, you know, it's not going to be perfect. And it's what we have, and it's the most convenient way, and they can mitigate, and you can fix your ballot and blah, 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 blah. And we really have done, it's still overall, even including people whose ballots didn't get counted, 47% turnout in a 20% turnout race. So vote by mail still works.
Yeah,
And it's not the 98% that it is during a general election, but it's still incredible. Okay, that's it.
That
I'm
is
finished.
really important
Yes.
information. All right. Thank you very much. So this is a great way to end this up. Thanks to everybody for being
you.
on here. We want to just remind you that we've got an exciting program coming up in March 24th. There's a group that I have just found out about the last couple of months. That is another one of these stealth Republican, I want to call them guerrilla warfare organizations. And I think this is going to be really interesting to learn a little bit more about this. It's kind of an innocuous name, Moms for Liberty, but they are not innocuous at all, quite the opposite. They're doing a lot to destroy public education and a lot to drive the legislative agenda to the far right. So please tune in March 24th, 7 p.m. It'll be a great program. Good night, everybody.
good night. Thank you.
Thank
Night.
thanks,
Good night.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome meeting.
Good job.
Great job.